They say blood is thicker than water, but in my family it was thinner than a royalty check. For 26 years, I was Maria, the responsible one, the quiet one, the shadow. My sister, Gazelle, was the sun, and our parents, our entire little solar system, revolved around her blinding light, leaving me in a permanent, cold eclipse. She wasn't just the golden child, she was the entire gold mine, and I was just one of the canaries they sent down into the dark to make sure the air was safe for her to breathe. From the time we were kids, our life was a single focused project, the Gazelle Show. Our family home in Austin wasn't a home, it was a rehearsal space. The living room carpet was worn bare, from years of my feet practicing the choreography I designed for her. The family van wasn't for vacations, it was a gear hauler, smelling perpetually of stale coffee and my sister's ambition. Our parents were the executive producers. My father, a man who traded his own dreams of being a musician for a steady job in logistics, poured every ounce of his frustrated ambition into Gazelle. My mother, a woman who valued appearances above all else, saw Gazelle as her masterpiece, a living trophy to parade in front of her friends. They mortgaged the house for her first demo. They cashed in their retirement accounts for her move to Los Angeles. And me, I was the unpaid intern, the built-in support system. I was her first roadie, her first backup dancer, her personal assistant, her confidant, her human alarm clock, and more often than not, her scapegoat. Every victory was hers. Every failure was mine. If she flubbed a lyric, it was because I distracted her during sound check. If a show had low ticket sales, it was because my social media posts weren't engaging enough. If she was in a bad mood, it was because I'd bought the wrong brand of almond milk for her pre-show tea. For a decade, I accepted this role. I told myself it was love. I told myself it was loyalty. I told myself that her success was our success, a shared victory for the family. I danced behind her, smiling until my cheeks ached, mouthing the words to songs I had helped her write in the dead of night, fueled by caffeine and the desperate hope that one day she'd turn around, pull me into the spotlight with her, and say, I couldn't have done it without my sister. That day never came. Instead, what came was a meeting, an emergency team meeting, she'd called it. I showed up at the sleek, soulless office of her new high-powered manager, Damon Vance, a man with teeth so white they looked like a threat. The air in the room was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and betrayal. Gazelle sat on a plush white sofa, not looking at me. She was fiddling with a new diamond ring, a gift to herself for her first platinum single. Our parents were there too, not in person, but as two disembodied heads on a giant television screen, their faces a mixture of grim determination and practiced pity. Maria, Gazelle began, her voice taking on the smooth professional tone she usually reserved for interviews. We need to talk about the brand. The brand, not her career, not her music, the brand. Damon leaned forward, placing his manicured hands on the glass table between us. Gazelle is entering a new phase of her career. We're looking at a global audience. Everything needs to be elevated, more professional, more polished. I just stared at him, then at my sister. A cold dread, heavy and familiar, began to pool in my stomach. I knew what was coming. I had felt it for months, in the way she'd stopped asking for my opinion, in the way she'd hired a new choreographer, without telling me, in the way she'd started taking calls from Damon in another room. What we're saying is, Gazelle said, finally meeting my eyes, her own gaze as flat and empty as a stage after the show is over, is that we're restructuring the team. We've hired a professional touring assistant, and we're holding auditions for new dancers. It's time for a change. The words hung in the sterile air. Restructuring, a professional assistant, new dancers. Every euphemism was a tiny sharp blade, cutting away another piece of my life. I looked at the television screen, at the faces of my mother and father, searching for some sign of protest, some flicker of defense for their other daughter. I found none. My father cleared his throat, his image on the screen crackling slightly. Honey, we think it's for the best. Gazelle needs to be surrounded by the best in the business now. You've been wonderful, sweetie, my mother added, her voice dripping with the kind of condescending sympathy that feels more like an insult. But let's be honest, you've been holding her back. It's a distraction, having family on the payroll. Having family on the payroll. I almost laughed. I had never seen a single paycheck. My payment was a cramped bunk on a tour bus, leftover catering, and the vague, unfulfilled promise of a shared future. I'm not on the payroll, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Gazelle waved a dismissive hand. Don't be so literal, Maria. The point is, this is a business decision. It's not personal. It's not personal. The four most personal words anyone can ever say to you. It's the ultimate dismissal, a way of telling you that your feelings, your history, your sacrifices, simply do not factor into the equation. They had just amputated me from the only life I had ever known, from the very core of my family, and they were telling me not to take it personally. I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. A strange, terrifying calm washed over me. It was the calm of acceptance, not acceptance of their decision, but acceptance of the truth I had been avoiding for years. I was not part of their team. I was a tool, and they were done using me. Okay, I said. The single word felt monumental. I walked out of the office, the sound of the heavy glass door clicking shut behind me feeling like the closing of a coffin lid. As I stood on the sidewalk under the unforgiving Los Angeles sun, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank, a direct deposit, $1,000. The memo line read, "Severance." They had fired me, and then they had the audacity to pay me for the first time on my way out the door. It was in that moment, staring at the paltry sum on my phone screen, that they made their biggest mistake. In their haste to discard me, to rebrand and elevate, they had forgotten all about my grandfather. They had forgotten about the worn, leather-bound folder tucked away in a memory box in my closet. They had forgotten about the contract I signed when I was 19 years old, a document born not of show business, but of old-world wisdom and a grandfather's love. It wasn't a standard employee agreement. It wasn't a payroll form. It was a partnership contract. A contract that my grandfather, a shrewd old music lawyer, had insisted we sign. A contract that granted me, Maria Elena Reyes, 30% of all of Giselle's master recording royalties. For life. They thought the show was over. They had no idea I was just about to start the intermission. The drive back to the small one-bedroom apartment in North Hollywood felt like a journey through a foreign country. The familiar streets, the palm trees silhouetted against the smoggy sky, all of it seemed alien. This apartment was another one of their investments in Giselle's career, a place for her indispensable sister to live, close enough to be on call 24/7. The rent was paid directly from an account managed by my father. As I turned the key in the lock, a new wave of cold realization washed over me. This wasn't my home, it was just another part of the stage set, and my lease was effectively up. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, the silence of the apartment roaring in my ears. For a decade, my life had been a constant barrage of noise, the thumping bass of a sound check, the whine of a tour bus engine, the incessant ringing of Giselle's phone, the chorus of my parents' expectations. Now, there was nothing, just the frantic, panicked thudding of my own heart. And then, the dam broke. It wasn't a loud, dramatic sob, it was a silent, suffocating collapse. I slid down the door and sat on the cheap linoleum floor, wrapping my arms around my knees as wave after wave of grief and humiliation crashed over me. I wasn't just fired, I was erased. My entire identity, my purpose for the last 10 years, had been built around her. I was Giselle's sister. I was Giselle's assistant. I was Giselle's dancer. Who was I without her? My mind, a traitorous archive, started pulling up memories, projecting them onto the blank canvas of my despair. I saw myself at 17, clutching an acceptance letter from the Ailey School in New York, a full-ride scholarship for dance. I could feel the crisp paper in my hands, smell the celebratory dinner my mother had made, her special paella, a dish reserved only for the grandest of occasions. It was the last time she ever made it for me. A week later, Giselle got her first offer to be an opening act for a minor country artist touring the Midwest. It was a grueling 6-month, 10-state tour in a cramped van. She couldn't do it alone. I remember the family meeting, so different from the one today. It was in our cozy living room in Austin. My father put his arm around me. "Maria Mia," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is her big break. This is the moment we've all worked for. She needs you." My mother had taken my hand. "That dance school will always be there, sweetie. But an opportunity like this, it's once in a lifetime. A family helps each other. It's what we do." Giselle had just looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. "I can't do it without you, Mia," she whispered, using my childhood nickname. "We're a team, always." So I turned down the scholarship. I packed a duffel bag and climbed into that smelly van. I told myself it was a sacrifice for our shared dream. They told me it was my duty. It wasn't about revenge then. It was about love. It was about believing in the myth of our family, the beautiful, destructive lie that we were all in it together. The memories kept coming, each one another stone, weighing me down. I remembered the winter I worked 2 jobs, a barista in the morning, a waitress at night, because my parents had maxed out their credit cards on Giselle's vocal coaching, and she needed new headshots. I handed her an envelope with $1,600 in cash, my fingers raw from steam wands and hot plates. She kissed my cheek and said, "You're the best," before immediately calling a photographer. There was no discussion of paying me back. It was just assumed my money was part of the collective Giselle fund. I saw myself on the side of a stage in Des Moines, my ankles screaming in pain, after a misstep in rehearsal. I'd wrapped it myself with an ace bandage and a handful of ice from the concession stand, because the tour budget didn't cover a medic, and Giselle had insisted the show must go on. I danced through the pain, my smile a plastic mask, because her performance was all that mattered. Then a different memory surfaced, sharp and clear, cutting through the fog of pain. It was my 19th birthday. We were back in Austin for a short break. My grandfather, Mateo, had taken me and Giselle to his dusty, book-lined law office. Abuelo Mateo was not like the rest of the family. He was a man carved from a different, harder wood. A successful music and entertainment lawyer in his day, he was sharp, pragmatic, and deeply suspicious of the world my parents were so desperate for Giselle to conquer. He saw the gleam in my parents' eyes not as pride, but as a dangerous obsession. He sat us down in his worn leather chairs that smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. He looked at me, his gaze serious. "Maria," he began, his voice a low rumble, "you are giving up your life for this, your education, your own path. I cannot stop you. Your parents will not listen to reason. But I will not let you be a fool." He pushed a thick, leather-bound document across his mahogany desk. "This is a partnership agreement," he said, tapping a gnarled finger on the cover. "It states that you, Maria Elena Reyes, are a founding partner in the artistic enterprise known as Giselle. It recognizes your contributions, choreography, creative consultation, management, and performance as integral to the creation of her recorded works. It entitles you to 30% of the net receipts from her master recording royalties, in perpetuity." Giselle had scoffed. "Abuelo, that's ridiculous. I'm not a company, we're sisters." My grandfather had leveled a steely gaze at her. "Today you are sisters. Tomorrow, when the money and the men in suits come, you will be a corporation. And family is the first asset a corporation liquidates. This," he said, turning back to me, "is not about trust, Mia, it's about business. Family and business is a toxic cocktail. This contract is the antidote." He made me read the key clauses aloud. He explained what master royalties were, the money earned from the actual sound recording, the song itself, every time it was streamed, sold, or used in a movie. It was the real, lasting wealth in the music industry. The performance fees, the t-shirts, that all fades, he'd said. But the masters are forever. He looked at Giselle. "You will sign this, or I will personally call every producer I know in this town, and tell them your family is building your career on the back of your sister's unpaid labor. We'll see how far your brand gets then." Scared and cornered, Giselle had signed. My father had grumbled about it being unnecessary and insulting, but he never dared to cross my grandfather. I signed it too, feeling a little embarrassed, a little silly, as if I were betraying the family first mantra we were raised on. I tucked the contract away, and for 7 years, I forgot it existed. I chose to believe in the fairy tale instead. Now sitting on my floor, the severance payment burning a hole in my bank account, my grandfather's words echoed in my head. Family is the first asset a corporation liquidates. They had liquidated me, and in doing so they had just activated the one clause they had all dismissed as the paranoid ramblings of an old man. A new feeling began to creep through the despair, a tiny, fragile shoot of anger. It started in my gut and spread, a slow, hot burn, the casual cruelty of it all, the severance. The way my mother had called me a distraction, the dead-eyed stare from my sister, the way they had presented their betrayal as a favor to me. My phone buzzed again. I looked at the screen. It was a text from Giselle, a photo of a moving box filled with my old dance shoes and some clothes, sitting on the curb outside her sprawling Beverly Hills mansion. The caption read, "Just dropped off the last of your stuff at the curb. Hope you find your own way. XOXO. The XOXO was like a match thrown on gasoline. The slow burn of anger erupted into a full-blown inferno. My tears dried. The grief receded, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Find my own way. I would, but I wouldn't be starting from scratch. I would be starting with the foundation they had forced me to build and then abandon. I scrambled to my feet, my body infused with a sudden, shocking energy. I ran to my bedroom closet and pulled down an old, dusty memory box from the top shelf. It was filled with old photos, concert tickets, and sentimental junk. Beneath it all was the leather-bound folder from my grandfather. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The paper was thick and creamy, the signatures at the bottom clear and undeniable. Giselle Rey Maria, witnessed and notarized by Mateo Vargas. I read the words again. Founding partner, integral to the creation, 30% in perpetuity. My grandfather had seen this day coming. He had known them better than I did. He had armed me for a war I never believed would happen. They had forgotten about the contract. They had forgotten about the old man who loved me enough to protect me from my own family. They thought they had the power. They thought they had all the leverage. But leverage is a funny thing. Sometimes it's not the person in the spotlight who has it. Sometimes it's the person who was there all along, quietly holding the ladder. And they had just kicked me off it, leaving the ladder in my hands. I looked at the signature on that document, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't see myself as Giselle's sister. I saw myself as her business partner, and my partner had just tried to dissolve our company without buying me out. A slow smile spread across my face. It felt foreign, sharp, and dangerous. It wasn't about revenge, until it was. The first step was admitting I couldn't do this alone. My righteous anger was a powerful engine, but I needed a navigator. I needed someone who could see the path through the legal jungle, someone who understood the language of war that was about to be declared. My first and only call was to Chloe. Chloe and I had been best friends since high school, a bond forged in the fires of teenage drama that had somehow survived my decade-long absorption into the Giselle vortex. Chloe was everything my family wasn't: grounded, fiercely logical, and brutally honest. She was now a paralegal at a corporate law firm in downtown LA, and she had always viewed my family's dynamic with the skeptical eye of a seasoned investigator. She'd never said, "I told you so," but it was a constant, unspoken undercurrent in our conversations. I met her at a noisy, dimly lit coffee shop that evening, the contract tucked inside my bag like a secret weapon. I told her everything. The meeting, Damon, my parents on the giant screen, the severance, the text message with the picture of my belongings on the curb. She listened patiently, her expression growing darker with every detail. When I finished, she just shook her head slowly. "They're not just users, Maria," she said, her voice low and furious. "They're amateurs. To do something so cruel and not even check if there was any paperwork. That's just sloppy." Then I slid the leather folder across the table. They forgot about this. Chloe opened it. Her eyes, trained to scan dense legal documents for loopholes and liabilities, moved quickly over the text. She read it once. Then she went back to the beginning and read it again, more slowly this time, her finger tracing the key phrases. Founding partner, creative consultation, master recording royalties, in perpetuity. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. The fury on her face had been replaced by something else. "Aw, Maria," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "This isn't a contract, this is a declaration of war. Your grandfather wasn't just a lawyer, he was a goddamn prophet." She leaned back in her chair, a slow, wicked grin spreading across her face. "Oh, they are so screwed." That one sentence from Chloe was like a shot of adrenaline to my soul. It was the first piece of external validation I'd had in a decade. For years my family had defined my reality, and in their reality, I was the one who was unreasonable, oversensitive, and lucky to be there. Chloe's reaction confirmed the truth. I was only just beginning to accept. I wasn't crazy. I was wronged. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Do I sue them? Do I call Giselle and threaten her with it?" "No," Chloe said immediately, her legal brain already firing on all cylinders. "That's what they'd expect. A messy, emotional fight. That's a battle they think they can win. They'll paint you as the bitter, jealous sister. You don't fight them on their turf, you fight them on yours. On paper, in the quiet, boring, soul-crushing language of corporate compliance. We're not going to file a lawsuit. We're going to file a form," She explained that confronting them directly would give them time to prepare, to hide assets, to launch a public relations smear campaign against me. The key wasn't to attack them, but to simply redirect the money. But I need a lawyer, I said, the reality of the situation dawning on me. A good one. I have $1,000 to my name. Chloe's grin widened. Leave that to me. This was a small glimpse into Chloe's own world, a subplot I was usually too self-absorbed to notice. Chloe worked for a senior partner named Mr. Henderson, a man notorious for taking credit for his paralegal's work. For years she had done the heavy lifting on major cases, drafting briefs and finding precedents, only to watch him present her work as his own genius. Her frustration with her own professional invisibility made my cause her own. This wasn't just about helping a friend, it was a proxy battle against every entitled credit-stealing boss she'd ever had. 2 days later, Chloe took me to a quiet, old-fashioned office building in Pasadena, the kind with a room-in-our operator and brass fittings. The name on the door read, Alistair Finch, ESQ. Mr. Finch was a man who seemed to belong to another era. He was in his late 70s, with a shock of white hair, a tweed jacket that had seen better days, and eyes that twinkled with a fierce intelligence. The office was filled with books, not files, and the air smelled of lemon polish and old paper. Chloe had found him through a network of retired legal professionals. Alistair Finch had been a contemporary and a friend of my abuelo Mateo. He greeted me with a warm, dry hand. I knew your grandfather, he said, his voice a gravelly baritone. Mateo was a shark who fought for the artists, a rare breed. He used to say that most musicians sign contracts that are essentially invitations to their own financial ruin. He believed in arming the talent. I handed him the folder. He put on a pair of gold-rimmed reading glasses and studied the document in silence. He didn't just read it, he seemed to commune with it, occasionally letting out a low chuckle or a soft, "Ah, clever Mateo." When he was done, he took off his glasses and looked at me. Your grandfather didn't just write you a contract, young lady, he said. He built you a fortress. This partnership structure, it's brilliant. You're not an employee they can fire. You're a partner they've illegally excluded. And this, he said, tapping a paragraph near the end, this is the master stroke. It was a prevailing party clause, but one with a vicious twist. It stipulated that if any partner initiated a legal challenge to the agreement and failed, they would be responsible for 100% of the other partner's legal fees. Mateo knew they would try to bully you with expensive lawyers, Finch explained. This clause makes it financial suicide for them to even try. Every letter their lawyer sends you would just be adding to a bill they'll eventually have to pay. Finch leaned back, a predatory glint in his eye. I'll take this case, and I'll do it on contingency. My payment will come from the first check that Apex Records cuts in your name. It would be an honor to help Mateo's granddaughter enforce one of his beautiful, vicious little masterpieces. The plan he laid out was exactly as Chloe had predicted, silent, bureaucratic, and lethal. We would not contact Giselle, Damon, or my parents. We would not make a single threatening phone call. Instead, Mr. Finch would draft 2 simple, formal letters. One would go to the head of the royalties department at Giselle's record label, Apex Records. The other would go to the legal department of the main performing rights organization, like ASCAP or BMI, which handled her publishing royalties. The letters were masterpieces of understated threat. They were titled, Notice of Partnership and Direction to Pay Pursuant to the Reyes Artistic Partnership Agreement of 2014. The letter simply stated that as a 50% partner in the creation of the master recordings, the contract gave me 30% of the net, but Finch was claiming a 50/50 partnership to the label to ensure they took it seriously and withheld the maximum amount, to be sorted out later. A portion of the royalties payable to Giselle Reyes were to be immediately diverted to a trust account managed by his firm. It included a notarized copy of the contract and a stern warning about the legal consequences of ignoring a valid partnership directive. Record labels and PROs are not interested in drama, Finch explained as he sealed the envelopes. They are giant, risk-averse corporations. Their only goal is to not get sued. When faced with a legitimate legal claim to a revenue stream, their standard procedure is to freeze the contested portion of the funds until the parties sort it out. They won't take sides, they'll just turn off the tap. We're not suing your sister, we're simply informing her paymasters that a portion of her money is in fact your money. As I left his office, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in years. I wasn't a victim anymore, I was a strategist. While my family was celebrating my dismissal, posting pictures of Giselle in a new recording studio with the hashtag #nextlevel, we were quietly planting a bomb in the heart of their financial empire. They were playing checkers, moving their pieces loudly and aggressively. We were playing chess, and we had just put their queen in a trap she couldn't see. I went out and got a job teaching a hip-hop class to teenagers at a community center in the valley. It paid very little, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, I was earning my own money, on my own terms. I was building my own life, one small, quiet step at a time. The waiting was the hardest part. The letters were sent via certified mail. Mr. Finch got the delivery confirmations. And then, silence. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. Life went on. I taught my dance classes. I found a new, smaller, and frankly, dingier apartment that I could afford on my own. I started to build a routine that didn't revolve around my sister's schedule. I learned to enjoy the quiet, but every night, I'd lie awake, wondering when the bomb would go off. I started to doubt myself. Maybe they'd found a loophole. Maybe Damon's high-priced lawyers had swatted Finch's letter away like a fly. Maybe this was all a fantasy. Chloe was my rock. Bureaucracies move slowly, she'd tell me over the phone. They're waiting for the next quarterly royalty payment cycle. That's when the numbers get run. Just be patient. The machine is working. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, it happened. Giselle's new album, Glass Throne, had been a massive success. The lead single had been #1 for 6 weeks. She had been bragging on her Instagram stories about the life-changing check she was about to receive, even posting a picture of a new sports car she was planning to buy. According to the industry calendar, today was the day the quarterly royalty payments from Apex Records were processed. I was in the middle of teaching a class, trying to show a group of awkward 15-year-olds how to do a proper body roll, when my phone, which I had left on a bench, started vibrating incessantly. It buzzed and buzzed and buzzed, a frantic, angry sound. I ignored it until the class was over. When I finally picked it up, I had 17 missed calls, 12 from my mother, 5 from my father, and a string of increasingly hysterical text messages. Mom, Maria, call me immediately, it's an emergency. Mom, pick up the phone. Now, Dad, what have you done? You need to call us back this instant. Mom, Giselle is crying. You are destroying this family. Dad, this is the heft. We are calling the police. A cold, thrilling wave of vindication washed over me. The bomb had gone off. I didn't have to imagine the scene. Chloe, through a friend of a friend who worked in the legal department at Apex, painted a vivid picture for me later that day. Giselle, basking in the glow of her success, had checked her bank account, expecting to see a deposit with at least 6 zeros. Instead, she saw a number that was significantly smaller. Confused, she called her manager, Damon. Damon, ever the slick operator, assured her it was probably a clerical error and called his contact in the royalty department. The response he received was not what he expected. The man in royalties, a weary accountant named Frank, was blunt. "There's no error, Damon," he said, his voice flat. "We received a legally binding notice of partnership and direction to pay 30% of Miss Reyes's master royalties have been diverted to a legal trust account as per the directive. Here's the attorney's name. I suggest you talk to him." The chain of screaming had officially begun. Damon, utterly blindsided, had apparently lost his cool veneer and started shouting at Frank, who calmly repeated the same information before hanging up. Damon then called Giselle and told her the news. Her reaction, according to Chloe's source, involved a thrown phone and a shattered lamp. Damon then called my father, the family's self-appointed CFO, demanding to know what this partnership agreement was. My father, who had dismissed the contract as abuelo's nonsense years ago, was speechless. And that's when my phone had started ringing. The first call I decided to answer was from my father. I took a deep breath, walked out of the dance studio into the afternoon sun and hit the green button. "Maria Elena Reyes," he bellowed, foregoing any greeting, "you will tell me what you have done right now." I held the phone away from my ear, letting him vent. He went on for a full minute, a tirade of accusations and threats. He called me ungrateful, vindictive, and selfish. He told me I was trying to sabotage my sister out of jealousy. When he finally paused to take a breath, I spoke, my voice calm and even, just as Mr. Finch had coached me. Hello, Dad. I didn't do anything. I'm simply enforcing a business agreement. What business agreement? That stupid piece of paper your grandfather tricked us into signing. It wasn't a trick, Dad. It was a contract. A legally binding one, I replied, the words feeling smooth and powerful in my mouth. You all told me that Gazelle needed to be more professional, that this was all just business. Well, this is me, being professional. Partners have a right to their share of the profits. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could hear my mother in the background, her voice a shrill shriek. What is she saying? Tell her to stop it. You can't do this, Maria, my father said, his voice losing its bluster, replaced by a note of genuine panic. You're going to ruin her. You're going to ruin this family. I'm not ruining anything, I said, a shard of ice in my own voice. I'm just collecting what I'm owed. You all had 10 years to treat me like a partner. You chose to treat me like an employee, and then you fired me. This is just the final invoice. Before he could respond, I hung up. I stood there for a moment, my hand shaking slightly, not from fear but from the sheer unadulterated thrill of it. For the first time in my life, I had not apologized. I had not backed down. I had not tried to manage their feelings. I had simply stated the facts. The power dynamic of our entire family had just been irrevocably altered by a single quiet click of a button. They thought they had all the cards. They just found out I had an ace tucked in my sleeve the entire time, and I had just played it. The family's reaction was as swift as it was predictable. They didn't pause for self-reflection. They didn't consider that perhaps they had made a mistake. Instead, they circled the wagons, not around the family, but around the money. And since Gazelle was still the primary source of that money, I was officially declared the enemy. My phone was bombarded with a new wave of messages, this time a toxic cocktail of guilt, rage, and emotional blackmail. My mother left a long, tearful voicemail. I don't know who you've become, Maria, she wailed, her voice thick with manufactured sorrow. Your grandfather would be so ashamed of you, using his memory to hurt your own sister. After everything we sacrificed for you children, this is how you repay us. By tearing this family apart over money. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. They, who had monetized Gazelle's childhood and leveraged my future, were accusing me of being the one obsessed with money. They, who had amputated me from the family unit without a second thought, were accusing me of tearing it apart. It was a masterclass in narcissistic projection. My father tried a different tactic, threats disguised as fatherly concern. You don't know what you're doing, Maria, he wrote in a long text message. You're messing with powerful people. Damon and the label, they will crush you. They will drag your name through the mud. For your own good, you need to stop this foolishness and sign whatever papers their lawyers send you. Don't throw your life away. Then came the social media campaign. Giselle posted a cryptic photo of a shattered mirror with the caption, "Sometimes the person you'd take a bullet for is the one behind the trigger." #betrayal, #family drama. My mother began sharing inspirational quotes about the pain of being a parent to an ungrateful child. It was pathetic, transparent, and to my surprise, deeply liberating. Every passive-aggressive post, every manipulative text, was another layer of proof that I had done the right thing. Their loyalty wasn't to me, their daughter and sister, it was to their lifestyle, a lifestyle I had unknowingly been co-funding with my own life force for a decade. The true test, however, came a week later. I was leaving my apartment to head to the community center when I saw a sleek, black SUV idling at the curb. The tinted window rolled down, and there was Gazelle. She looked smaller without her usual entourage, her stage makeup, her aura of untouchable stardom. She just looked like my sister. "Get in," she said, her voice flat. My first instinct was to say no, to walk away. But Mr. Finch's advice echoed in my head. Always take the meeting, let them show you their hand. I got in, the car smelled of leather and her expensive perfume, a scent that used to mean home and now smelled only of betrayal. She didn't drive. She just sat there, staring out the windshield. "I don't get it, Mia," she said, using my nickname for the first time in years. It was a calculated move, meant to disarm me. "Why are you doing this? I thought we were sisters." "We are," I said calmly. "We're also business partners." "You seem to have forgotten that part," She finally turned to look at me, and I was shocked to see that her eyes were filled with tears. Real tears. I messed up, she said, her voice cracking. I let Damon and Mom and Dad get in my head. They were telling me I needed to be ruthless, that I had to cut ties. But it's been awful without you. The new assistant doesn't know how I like my tea. The new dancers are technically good, but they don't have our chemistry. She was laying it on thick, pulling out all the old hits, our shared history, the inside jokes, the manufactured vulnerability. This was her stage, and she was giving the performance of a lifetime. I miss you, she whispered, reaching for my hand. I want you back. Come back on the tour. I'll fire the new girl. I'll even give you a real salary this time. We can forget all this legal nonsense and go back to the way things were. For a fleeting second, the old Maria, the one who craved her sister's approval more than oxygen, wanted to believe her. The offer was so tempting, a return to the familiar, a healing of the wound, a chance to have my family back. But then I looked closer. I saw the calculation in her eyes behind the tears. I saw the desperation. She wasn't offering me a partnership. She was offering me my old job back, the gilded cage I had just escaped. She wasn't trying to fix the relationship. She was trying to regain control. It was a test, and I knew exactly how to answer. The way things were wasn't working for me. Giselle, I said, gently pulling my hand away. If you want me back, it has to be on new terms. Her eyes narrowed slightly. What new terms? Fire Damon, I said, my voice steady, and issue a public statement, acknowledging me as a co-founder of your brand and a partner in your music. Acknowledge the contract. Her face changed instantly. The tears vanished as if on cue. The soft, pleading expression was replaced by a familiar, cold fury. It was like watching a mask drop. Are you insane? She hissed. I can't fire Damon. He's the reason Glass Throne went to #1. Acknowledging you as a partner, it would make me look like a fraud, like I didn't do it myself. And there it was. The truth. Her ego was more important than our relationship. Her brand was more important than her sister. The fear of sharing the credit was greater than any love she claimed to have for me. Then there's nothing more to talk about, I said, my voice quiet but firm. The contract stands. 30%. My lawyers will continue to be in touch with your label. I opened the car door. The look on her face was one of pure, unadulterated rage. You will regret this, Maria, she spat, her voice dripping with venom. You think you're so smart with your dusty old contract. My lawyers will tear it to shreds. You will end up with nothing, less than nothing. I will make sure of it. Good luck with that, I said, and closed the door. As I walked away from the black SUV, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt an immense, profound sense of relief. The last shred of hope I'd been clinging to, the hope that she loved me, that she would eventually do the right thing, was finally gone, and its absence was a gift. She hadn't just shown me her hand, she had shown me her entire empty heart. The power hadn't just shifted, it was now firmly and forever in my hands. The aftermath of my meeting with Giselle was exactly what I expected. The very next day, a thick, intimidating envelope arrived from a top-tier entertainment law firm in Beverly Hills. It was a cease and desist letter, a masterpiece of legal aggression. It accused me of tortious interference, extortion, and fraud. It claimed the partnership contract was a product of undue influence exerted by an elderly relative on a minor. Giselle was 18, not a minor, and that my claim was frivolous and malicious. It demanded I immediately retract my notice to the record label or face a lawsuit that would seek millions in damages. It was designed to terrify me into submission. A week ago, it would have worked. I scanned the letter, my heart beating steadily, and forwarded a picture of it to Mr. Finch with a simple message. The first volley has been fired. His reply came less than an hour later. It was a copy of the letter he had just sent back to Giselle's high-priced legal team. It was beautiful in its simplicity. It was only 2 paragraphs long. The first paragraph politely acknowledged receipt of their letter. The second paragraph was a direct quote of the prevailing party clause from the contract, the one my grandfather had crafted with such malicious foresight. Finch's letter ended with a single devastating sentence. Pursuant to the enclosed, please be advised that all billable hours your firm expends in this matter are being tracked by my client. We look forward to receiving your first invoice, which under the terms of the agreement your client signed, you will be contractually obligated to pay on her behalf upon the dismissal of your baseless claims. Have a wonderful day. He had weaponized their own aggression against them. He had turned their billable hours into my asset. It was a checkmate move, and we both knew it. The silence from their side was immediate and absolute. A week went by. In two, Chloe, ever my source for industry gossip, heard through the grapevine that Giselle's lawyers had advised her in the strongest possible terms that she had no case. The contract was ironclad, her signature was valid, and the undue influence claim was laughable. To proceed with a lawsuit would not only be a guaranteed loss, but would also rack up an astronomical legal bill that she would be forced to pay to me. Damon, whose own 20% commission was being directly threatened by my 30%, was apparently apoplectic. He pushed Giselle to fight, to find other lawyers, to go public. But Apex Records, the corporate behemoth whose only concern was avoiding liability, stepped in. Their legal team informed Damon and Giselle that if they initiated a messy public lawsuit that could damage the brand, the label would consider it a breach of contract and invoke the morals clause, potentially dropping her entirely. Damon was trapped, Giselle was trapped. They were hemmed in by the very corporate and legal structures they had tried to use against me. Then, the summons came, not from a court, but from my parents. They demanded one last meeting. To resolve this as a family, Mr. Finch insisted on hosting it at his office. A neutral ground, he'd said with a twinkle in his eye, where we control the tea service. I walked into his stately conference room with Chloe by my side. She had taken the day off, telling her boss it was a critical client negotiation, and the vicarious thrill of it all was making her practically glow. Mr. Finch sat at the head of the long, polished mahogany table, looking like a benevolent but immovable judge. A few minutes later, they arrived. Giselle, Damon, and my parents. They looked terrible. Giselle's face was pale and drawn, the confident swagger gone. Damon looked like his $1,000 suit was choking him. My parents just looked old and defeated. They sat down opposite us, the wide expanse of the table feeling like a chasm between two warring nations. My father, ever the patriarch, tried to take charge. "All right," he started, his voice attempting a commanding tone that just came out as strained. "This has gone on long enough. Maria, this is not you. We are a family. You need to stop this." Before I could respond, my mother chimed in, her voice trembling with theatrical emotion. "We raised you to be loyal. We raised you to love your sister. What are you getting out of this? A little bit of money? Is it worth destroying your family? Think of the memories. Think of our family." She gestured between us all, as if trying to conjure some long-dead spirit of unity. I took a breath. This was it, my closing argument. I looked at my mother, then my father, then my sister. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt a deep, profound pity. "Memories," I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the silent room. "You want to talk about memories?" I remember turning down a full scholarship to Ailey because Giselle needed me. I remember working 2 jobs to pay for her headshots, while you told me it was my contribution. I remember dancing on a sprained ankle in front of 2,000 people because your brand couldn't afford a medic. For 10 years my life wasn't my own. It was a line item in the budget for Project Giselle, an unpaid one. I turned my gaze to Giselle. "You told me it wasn't personal, it was a business decision. I'm just honoring that. You fired me from a job I was never paid for, but you can't fire a founding partner from the business. My 30% isn't revenge. It's my deferred salary. It's my equity. It's the price of a decade of my life. It's the fee for all the times I held you up so you could shine." I finally looked at my parents. "And you? You talk about family, but when it came down to a choice between your 2 daughters, you didn't choose the star, you chose the money. You didn't just abandon a daughter, you made a bad business decision. You thought I was a worthless asset, so you discarded me. But it turns out, I was the one holding 30% of the company's stock. You didn't back the wrong daughter, you just failed to understand her value. And now you're facing the consequences of that poor investment." The silence that followed was absolute. Damon stared at the table. Giselle was openly crying, but this time the tears looked real, born of defeat, not manipulation. My mother had her hand over her mouth, her face ashen. My father just looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time in years, and in his eyes, I saw not anger but the dawning horrific understanding of what they had lost, not the money. Me. Mr. Finch cleared his throat softly. "Well," he said, arranging a few papers in front of him, "I think that concludes this matter. The direction to pay stands. It has been a pleasure meeting you all." It was a dismissal. There was nothing left to say. They had come here for a negotiation, for a surrender, but there was nothing to negotiate. The new reality had been established. The silent takeover was complete. The brand they had built on my back now owed me a permanent, lifelong dividend. 6 months can feel like a lifetime. In the half-year that followed that final crushing meeting, my world bloomed into color while theirs seemed to fade to gray. The first royalty check that arrived was staggering. It was more money than I had ever seen, a figure so large it felt like a typo. After Mr. Finch took his well-deserved contingency fee, the remaining sum was still enough to change my life. But I found, to my surprise, that the money itself wasn't the point. It was the freedom it represented. I didn't buy a sports car or a mansion. I used the first major payment to lease a rundown warehouse space in a part of the city that the tour buses never drove through. I spent 2 months renovating it myself, with help from Chloe and a few of the older kids from my community center class. We put up mirrors, laid down a proper sprung floor, and painted the walls in bright, optimistic colors. I called it the Second Act Dance Studio. I offered free and subsidized classes to kids in the neighborhood, kids who had the talent but not the resources, kids who, like me, were in danger of being overlooked. Finding a raw, gifted dancer and telling them, "I see you, let's work," became the most rewarding thing I had ever done. I was building something that was entirely mine, funded by the past, but focused wholly on the future. I didn't have to follow my family's downfall on social media. The news trickled down to me through Chloe's network of industry whispers. Giselle's career began to falter. Her follow-up single, a song Damon had pushed her to release, was a commercial and critical failure. The critics called it hollow and uninspired. The magic, it seemed, had been a collaborative effort. Without my choreography to translate her emotions into movement, without my late-night songwriting sessions to find the honest hook, her performance felt flat. The glass throne she had built was proving to be just that, fragile and empty. Damon, furious at his permanently slashed commission and Giselle's declining profitability, quit her team to chase the next new pop starlet. The label, seeing her as damaged goods, shifted their marketing budget to other artists. The brand was tarnished. The financial consequences for my parents were more direct. They had been living off Giselle's generosity, a generosity fueled by royalties they now had to share. They were forced to sell the big house in Austin, the one that had served as our family's rehearsal hall and shrine to Giselle's ambition. They moved into a small, nondescript condominium complex. My mother's paella parties were a thing of the past. Chloe told me she'd seen my dad's LinkedIn profile. He was looking for logistics jobs again. The dream was over. They tried to reach out. At first it was voicemails filled with half-hearted apologies and suggestions that we could put all this behind us. Then came the birthday cards with carefully worded, non-committal notes inside. I never responded. It wasn't out of spite, not anymore. It was a matter of self-preservation. I had spent 26 years in their storm. I was finally in a place of peace, and I had no intention of letting the rain back in. The door wasn't locked and bolted, it was simply closed. And here I am now, sitting in the office of my studio, watching a new generation of dancers find their footing. It's funny, for so long I thought my purpose was to be a mirror, reflecting my sister's light. But I was never a mirror. I was a light source of my own, one they had just kept covered up. It was never about the money, not really, not at its core. It was about being seen. For a long time I thought I needed them to acknowledge my worth. I thought their validation was the prize. But I learned a very valuable, and very painful, lesson. You can't force other people to see your value. You can only set the price for your absence. They thought I was worth $1,000 severance check. I just let the world and the contracts correct their math. They forgot about the contract. But I never did, and in the end, it wasn't about revenge, it was about restitution. It was about finally getting paid what I was owed. So if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been the one holding the ladder while someone else climbed to the top, hit that like button. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have taken the deal to come back, or would you have done what I did? I read all the comments, and I want to hear your stories. And please subscribe for more stories about getting exactly what you're owed, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to stop fighting for a seat at their table and go build your own.